Hi everyone, I'm here with Kristen Ciccarelli, author of the Scary trilogy, which is not yet a trilogy, but it will be.
Soon, very soon.
And because she has built such an interesting fantasy world, we wanted to ask her some questions about that. So that's what I'm going to do today. Can you explain to our viewers what the fantasy world in Scary looks like?
Oh my gosh, okay. I just got a question about this on Instagram actually, so sort of. So there are, sorry, can I see actually just the map? Because originally, in the first two books, it's sort of just,
the map's in this one.
In the first two books, you're just on the mainland. So if you have the Caged Queen, there's a map of the world. I don't know if you can see that.
If you have the Dutch edition.
Oh, sorry. If you have the Dutch edition, yeah. If you have the Dutch edition of the Caged Queen, the Dutch edition is the best edition, by the way. There's a map, and for the first two books, the characters stay on the mainland, and so that's Furgard, the Sand Sea, and the Scrublands, and those places were very loosely inspired by places in North Africa and also the Ethiopian highlands. But in the third book, the characters leave the mainland and they go to this magical place called the Star Isles. And the Star Isles are very loosely inspired by the island where I live. So we're kind of moving away from like the desert and the sandy place to a more sort of rugged, rocky, misty coastal place. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah, then you've also kind of answered where did the idea from the world come from. Have you ever written your own fantasy world before this?
Yes, like in unpublished books, you mean? Like in manuscripts? Yeah, so yes, but a lot. So the last Samsara I started when I was 17, the very first version of it, there's been about 3 different versions over like a period of 10 years. I wrote and then I rewrote and then I rewrote it again. And so I've been building this world for quite a while, but I have written other places. One was, the one that got really close, the book, it almost got sold to a publishing house and almost became a book, but then didn't in the end. It was very loosely based on the place where I grew up, so my grandfather's grape farm, but specifically the forest behind my grandfather's grape farm, which was like, in the book, was populated by like all of these sort of scary creatures, and it had like a magic system and all of that sort of thing. But it was half real world and half fantasy. So
right.
Very different from Scary.
Okay. We were just talking about the cookbooks. Oh yeah, cookbooks. Your tip about cookbooks.
Okay. Yeah, so in cookbooks you get all sorts of sensory details, and like, so what tastes and smells and like the colors, what kind of vegetation, what kind of animals are around in a certain area, and you also will often get like personal stories from people. So you can get a lot of things from a cookbook, like the sense of a place, and it's those specific details that help bring a world to life. So the smell of the sand in the Sand Sea, for example, will help like root your reader in that place, or the sound of the eucalyptus trees sort of rattling in the wind, like that also, like, it really grounds the reader. And so having those real world details can help you build a fantasy world, because it doesn't take your reader as much to believe in it. So yeah.
That's such a smart way to do it.
Question now.
Yeah, how you introduce the world. Okay. No, the question was how would you tips for writers, how they can build their own world. Yeah.
And okay, so one more thing that I would say is like, so if you have unknown words, so like a Scary, so you want to use as little unknown words as you possibly can, or sort of like delay it so that when a reader opens the book, they're not bombarded by so much that they don't know, because that will just sort of like, okay, I'm done with this book. So you want to like use those words really sparingly at first to kind of lure them in. So yeah.
Smart. What are some of your favorite fantasy worlds in other books and maybe on television?
Okay. So I'm obsessed with Star Wars. So I don't know, like, I feel like Star Wars is science fiction, but I think it's a bit more fantasy than it is science fiction. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but that's okay. And so yeah, I love the world. And I think, part of the thing that I love about Star Wars is it's set on different planets, and all of those planets have different landscapes and different places and stuff. So that's what I love about Star Wars World. But I also, in terms of books, I also love, this isn't a fantasy world. Okay, I'm not gonna say that one. Okay. In books, I love, well, like the Grisha verse, so the Grisha trilogy, like I love all of her places. And then an older book that I really love, I don't think there's a name for the world, but it's just one book, and it's really old. It's called The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia McKillip. It's a fantasy, it's an adult fantasy that I read growing up, and is probably my favorite book. And I just love her world, and she has sort of these magical creatures that the main character, who is essentially a wizard, can summon once she has their names, and then she's sort of in control of them. And I just think that was a really cool concept.
Did you take anything yourself from those?
I think probably. I think that the Forgotten Beasts of Eld, I mean, like Asha summons dragons. She can't like control them or anything, but there is something about sort of that sort of summoning magical creatures that I'm like, maybe, because like the next thing that I'm writing is sort of similar, like there's big monsters and stuff. So maybe there's something there that I'm attracted to, but also like powerful women. So Sybil, who's the main character of The Forgotten Beasts of Eld, she is like a wizard, and she can kind of play the men in the world below who are like fighting wars and over territory and all these things. She can kind of play them like pieces on a chessboard. And that was really the first book where I read as a girl growing up that I was like, this girl is powerful, and like she's like the center of her own story. And so that was really inspiring to me, and I think I'm attracted to that also. So
yeah, I think you can definitely see that in
thank you.
They are all very strong female characters.
Thank you.
We all know there are millions of versions of dragons in books and films. And how did you design your dragons? How did you think of what they could and couldn't do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Dragons are they've been done so often that to make them unique, I think, is really hard. So I did two things. Kind of to the point about the cookbooks and the sensory details. Like when I was doing research, I researched like reptiles basically in order to make sort of the physical biological anatomy of the dragons realistic, so that so it helps the reader believe that they're real. But then I also made them attracted to stories, in particular these old sort of myths and legends. And so it's because in like sort of the Western tradition of dragons, usually dragons are attracted to treasure, or like sometimes virgin women, I think, is a thing. Like people will sacrifice their women to dragons. So so I wanted something like that, and so I made them attracted to stories essentially. And so these stories, if you tell a dragon one of these old stories, it makes them stronger, and they can breathe fire and all of these things. So that was my twist on them.
I think it's very smart. It's especially smart because you know that when someone reads your book, they love stories, or they fix it up. So it works. And
usually dragons too. I find that the dragon lovers are attracted to the story about the dragon slayer.
Yeah, you've kind of already answered this, but I hope to get some more out of you. Do you already have some ideas for future books? Are they also fantasy?
Okay, so I do, so I love fantasy. If I could write fantasy forever, I would. Maybe even like I was talking about Star Wars, maybe moving a little bit into sci-fi, but I don't think I could go full on sci-fi. It would have to be sort of a blend. But the project I'm working on right now, which is a secret and just something I'm playing around with, so I don't know what's going to happen, but it's a fantasy series, and it's set in a totally different world than Ascari, but almost like a much bigger world. Like Ascari is sort of like this one place on a map, and this would be much more, it's a much bigger world. And there are monsters, and there are these people who can summon monsters, and that's all I'll say.
Sounds interesting. Yeah. I really hope we'll get to read that too. Thank you very much for answering the questions.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell our viewers to subscribe to the channel?
To subscribe to the channel?
Yeah.
Okay. And subscribe to this channel.